Can we talk about something? I'm going to be honest with you. There are some things that I've done in my life, whether I used to do them or sometimes I still do them, that have caused me some problems. I would say that they are self-sabotaging behaviors. Sometimes I have figured out on my own that I was doing those things. Sometimes someone was kind enough to point out to me that I was doing those things. What I have found that just taking small steps towards overcoming these behaviors have resulted in big changes, and my life has become much happier, even though I still have many challenges. And if you find that you relate to any of this, you might want to consider subscribing, because we talk about a lot of interesting things on this channel. We're going to go over some self-sabotaging behaviors, but what I have noticed that these things are often in pairs. They're like extreme ends of a spectrum, and sometimes they are like grouped together, and this behavior will cause this behavior, which will cause this behavior. So I'm going to give you an example of this from my own life. I grew up in a small town, very, very small town. There were only around 21 girls in my class, and we all grew up together. It was very rare that a new girl would move into our town, and so we knew each other very well, too well. As often happens, the girls divided up into little groups. There were the popular groups, which were the mean girls or the mean girl supporters. There were the kind of the middle of the road girls, and these were the girls that the mean girls often picked on. And then the girls were here that they couldn't care less, and they lived their own life and were just in a bubble on the other end of it. I was the girl that fell in the middle of the spectrum, where the mean girls like to pick on me. Sometimes they'd welcome me into the group, but my function was to be their scapegoat, where they picked on me and did mean things to me. And then I would stand up for myself. I'd pull myself out of there, which would actually make it worse for me. I existed in that world from kindergarten through the end of my junior year. And I graduated early so I could get out of there. And it wasn't until I got out of there that I really started to experience more normal social behavior and find out, wow, everyone's not watching me all the time. And it took me a long time. And I finally am at the point where I don't feel that people are watching me all the time and feel like I'm going to get criticized all the time. And then I grew up in a family where there was a culture of really wanting to do well, really wanting to achieve. And I received easy criticism from some people who felt morally obligated, and they were loving, very loving, but often their version of love was to make sure you knew that you had made the mistake or you didn't look quite right or whatever it was. And so my nerves were just kind of on end all the time, to the point I remember one time I was practicing the piano. I learned to play the piano at a very early age, and my mother had said something like, "Oh, what would Beethoven think if he heard you play that way?" And I was like, Beethoven is dead. Oh my goodness, you dead? Composers listen and they care? And even though I knew that was not a logical thought, I went through years of I became too concerned about what these dead composers might think, that I was messing up their music, which was ridiculous. But because I was being listened to all the time, my mother was a piano teacher, and every single false note was, hey, B flat or whatever all the time. My nerves were on end all the time. And it took me until my 60s to not feel that way. I was a music teacher myself, and I worked really hard not to do that to my own students, to really give them love and support and belief in them. But I'd be in my house playing the piano. No one was there that would criticize me, but still having this running feeling that someone was watching me and criticizing me all the time. The reason I bring all of that up, because we've talked about what low self-esteem is, a sabotaging behavior. It can sabotage your enjoyment in life. It can sabotage your relationships with other people because you feel that you're not good enough for them, or you become too critical of them as a method of making yourself feel better, which is a self-sabotaging behavior. You become afraid of feedback, which can really affect you negatively when you're in the workplace because it's a requirement. First of all, when you're in school, you're going to receive feedback that you didn't get something right. And then when you get in the workplace, most people have a boss, and the boss is required to correct you when you've done something wrong because it can affect the team, it can affect the company. And if your nerves are on end all the time, it's hard to get the feedback, which means that you get defensive, which is a self-sabotaging behavior. You can easily end up fighting back against any time someone is correcting you, which then can really mess you up because people have a hard time being around other people that are defensive. So when I was at my last job, we had this culture based on this book called The Oz Principles, I think. And one of the principles was that not only should you take feedback, but you needed to actively seek feedback. And I was in a position where, of course, I received feedback from my boss, who is a vice president and the owner of the company. I had to give feedback to large numbers of people. And of course, I wanted to give the feedback in a very supportive way, and I worked really hard to do that because I basically believe in people and their capabilities. And I was a teacher, and the kind of teacher, a music teacher, who really wanted to build a team and have people feel good and believe in themselves, because that's how you get students to perform. And that's kind of my mentality, and I didn't want to be what I experienced. So I had to give the feedback, and I was always trying to help them in a positive way, but sometimes you just have to say, hey, this was wrong and you can't do it this way, and this is how you do it. So I was on this other end of the feedback, and I learned that if I was dealing with an employee, it was so much better if they could self-reflect and go, oh gosh, yeah, I did make that mistake. Oh gosh, I'm never going to do that again. Conversation was simple. They'd go off and they would correct the mistake. Everybody was happy. There were no hard feelings on any side. It was so much easier than someone who was automatically fighting back every single thing. So I learned, and this is good for us to do whether we're working in a job or we are generally around people, and so we will get feedback in some sort of way all the time. If instead of automatically fighting back about it, we can say to ourselves, okay, I'm going to step back and give myself some time and then start to think, is there a kernel of truth in this? Because if there's a kernel of truth in it, then I can stop doing that and my life is now going to get easier. Sometimes you can step back and go, no, you know what? There really isn't any truth in that at all. I wonder why they said that. And then if you're looking at them, you might see, gosh, that's someone who's really naturally kind of critical, which means there's something going on with them. Because that's something I learned with people who are really critical, maybe the people who feel just really free and easy to go on social media and say really mean things or comments on YouTube videos or are criticizing people and their lives, or walking down the mall and doing this running commentary on the status or the look of someone else. Oh, they're fat, they're thin. Oh, they are messy, or, ooh, they must think they're too good because look at how they're dressed, without even realizing it. They've got this running commentary on everything in life all the time. Well, that's usually based on some self-esteem issues, and that is a means of making themselves feel better about themselves because other people have problems. And unfortunately, this is a societal problem which I believe has been made worse, far worse, by social media. It's still a natural behavior that we really need to overcome. Now, I've just listed a lot of self-sabotaging behaviors. This running commentary of being too critical of other people, of having the self-esteem problem so that we are too critical of people, of giving people feedback that's not warranted because we are having problems. Either our self-esteem is too low or our self-esteem has become too high, which underneath it is often really that it's too low, or that we can't give feedback well, which is a self-sabotaging behavior because it affects our relationships with other people, or we can't take feedback well and so we become defensive. Do you see now what I say about these self-sabotaging behaviors? Kind of all feed on each other. But the nice thing about it is if you start pulling on one of these threads and work on it, you realize, wow, I do that, and start working on it. Then you start seeing how you are doing this other thing and you can start pulling on that thread and it all falls apart and your life becomes easier and you become more aware and you become much pleasanter person to be around, and you start feeling a lot better about yourself because you're not in this kind of angst state all the time. Another set would be avoiding responsibilities or overworking. I have tended to fall on the overworking side because when I was growing up, one of the ways I helped maintain my self-esteem as worth as a person was being really good in school and getting really high grades, learning how to play a lot of musical instruments. I'd go to music clinics and read a lot, and that kind of helped me realize that I could do things well, even though I was getting a lot of criticism from the peanut crowd. But that got me into a habit of overworking. And then, of course, I have some people in my life who tended to overwork and do everything too much, which is really ironic because one of those people who always did too much would say to me, can't you ever do anything halfway? Do you always have to do everything too much, too big, too hard? And I would think, wait a minute. But it was true. And that's something I've had to learn to pull the thread on so that I don't overwork. And it's so easy for me to fall into that. So easy. When I had a business, I would work 12, 14, 16 hours a day, 6 days a week. Then you get sick. It interferes with the relationships. It interferes with the enjoyment of your life. You even forget how to have fun in your life because you're overworking. It's really easy to tell yourself, I love to work. And you may love to work, but at the expense of so many things. My last job had a real culture of 8 to 5 that came from the very top. 5 o'clock, we all go home and we don't think about work again. That was really shocking to me at first because everywhere I'd worked before, everybody was working way too much. So that was really good for me, but I have found it so easy for me to fall back into overworking and doing too much. Then I got COVID. I got long COVID and it affected my health, really bumped up my fibromyalgia, which I had been maintaining, but I've had to learn to step back, maintain my energy, that if I overwork, I pay big time for it, then I can't do anything for quite a while. And I actually made a video about how to maintain your energy in a good way on my other channel, which is Towards a Simple Life. So I am going to link to that video. On the thumbnail, it says the magical dots. I learned how to do that from a cognitive therapist, John Linford, and it's the most important video on that channel. That may be the most important video I ever make in my entire career as a YouTuber, because it helps you really learn to balance your energy in your life, and that you really need to balance your work and your fun and your rest and taking care of your health. So go do that, because not doing enough is a self-sabotaging behavior, obviously, because then people won't see you as reliable. And the thing about not doing much, the more you don't do much, the easier it is to not do much, and it really will spiral down. That's even a danger of being chronically ill, where you don't feel good, and then it's a real thing that you don't feel good, but then you can so easily fall into, I don't feel good, and watching TV all day long and not even trying to do anything that's fun, like some art or some reading or something that can stimulate your brain. So it's so easy to slide into that, and it's so easy to slide into overworking. And just like most of these things, stop self-sabotaging ourselves, to get ourselves back into the middle, moderation in all things, but making excuses for yourself. Oh, I saw that so much in my working career, and I know I used to do that all the time when I was younger. Especially making excuses goes with being defensive, but it can get out of control to the point where when I was driving to work and I would be concerned that I might get there a little late, in my head I would be running these excuses or these reasons that I would tell whoever was interested, which in my job, nobody was interested, but I was still in my mind running all these reasons that I was late so that I could make an excuse for me being late, even though nobody cared to ever hear it. When you're having to work with people and build people and help them along, or they're responsible to you, it just makes things so much harder if you need to tell them, hey, I need you to do this, or maybe not do it this way, and they would automatically give you an excuse about why they did it. You don't care why they did it. What you really care about is going, yeah, oh, I see that. I'll work on that. That's all you want for them. You don't want to hear why they did it wrong. You just want to hear that they understand what you're saying and they're going to work on it in the future. And then everybody goes away and just fine. And so if someone is constantly making excuses for everything, that annoys people. And that self-sabotages you. That causes you to not do as well with those people as you would otherwise. A twin of making excuses is blaming others, not being willing to take accountability for your own failures, your own mistakes, and offloading everything that goes wrong in your life on someone else. And I would say that's a real problem in today's world, that instead of saying, okay, I want this outcome and I'm really going to do this. I'm going to have to go to school. I'm going to work hard. I am going to figure out my budget or whatever it might be. We offload that and say, oh, well, if the political leaders were better, then I could do this. Or if my family would stop doing this, then I would be happy. Always putting this blame on someone else, when the truth is the only one who really has true effect on the outcome and the happiness level of our lives is ourselves. If someone is doing something rotten or has done something rotten, we can't control that, but we can control how we respond. If we respond poorly and go around blaming all the bad choices we make after that on them, then we have just self-sabotaged ourselves. Blaming each other has this twin, which is grudges, holding grudges. It's really in our best interest to forgive people. That doesn't mean we have to be around people, and doesn't necessarily mean that we'll forget what has happened, although I found that sometimes when I forgive, I really kind of forget it completely. But if we hold on to the grudge and we don't forgive, we ultimately hurt ourselves, and then we have these behaviors that hurt us with other people, and we have thereby self-sabotaged ourselves. Do you have any other ideas of things we do that we need to change so that we can do better in our lives? I'm really interested in what you think. But be kind, be supportive, because that's what we do on this channel. And here is a video that YouTube feels that you're going to enjoy. I hope I see you next time. Bye.